This bill does not add to the deficit. In fact, according to the Council of Economic Advisors, this bill will save $1.6 trillion.
And now we're going to talk about one final thing before we wrap up today's episode, and that's the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. That's literally what they named it. The massive tax and spending bill Republicans are trying to push through a pretty closely divided Congress right now. And look, it's complicated how the sausage is made in Washington. I've reported and covered on this stuff for years. I have some idea of how it all works, but it's not easy for anyone to just get everything they want and everything they do. But I do have to take issue with one particular thing from the Trump administration, which is just kind of the gaslighting of it all. This is not a good bill. It is a deeply flawed bill. And look, when you have a razor-thin majority in the House and in the Senate, fairly thin, and you need to pass this stuff, I understand you can't get everything you want. But just don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. That's really all I'm asking for. And unfortunately, with White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, that is apparently too much to ask. Take a listen to this, because Karoline Leavitt is gaslighting us again.
Is the president okay with this bill adding to the deficit?
This bill does not add to the deficit. In fact, according to the Council of Economic Advisors, this bill will save $1.6 trillion. And the president absolutely understands and hears the concerns of fiscal conservatives and of Americans who want to get our fiscal house in order. That's what the intention of this bill is. There's $1.6 trillion worth of savings in this bill. That's the largest savings for any legislation that has ever passed Capitol Hill in our nation's history. The next bill that even comes close was $800 billion. That's less than half of the savings that we see in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so the goal of this bill is to produce economic growth, to cut taxes, and to get our fiscal house in order. And this is the right step in the right direction towards doing that.
So this is why I could never be the press secretary, because I don't even blame Karoline, but your job as press secretary is to lie. It is to stand in that room, look into a camera, and tell the American people things that you know are not true. And that's what she is doing here. What she's talking about as savings are spending cuts, but this bill pairs it with massive tax cuts, which some of which are good, some of which I have questions about. But when you do that, the net effect is adding trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars to the national debt and the budget deficit over the coming decade. That's just a fact. That's what every nonpartisan analysis has found, from the Congressional Budget Office to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget and beyond. It just is what it is. When you look at all the provisions of this bill, the spending cuts and then the much bigger tax decreases, the net effect is adding trillions of dollars to the deficit. And of course, Trump promised to balance the budget and get all the house in order and all that, and this bill doesn't do that. And I understand why, right? It would be basically impossible to get a bill passed that actually does balance the budget. Congress is just not willing to make the kinds of spending cuts you would need to make to actually do that. So it's not really Trump's fault, but again, just be honest about it. And they're not doing that. Here's the truth about just how big an impact this budget bill would have on the national debt from Manhattan Institute fiscal hawk and budget analyst, one of the best in the business, Jessica Riedel.
This tax bill's enormity is being underplayed. If you take out the expiration dates, which even Republicans say are not real, this tax bill will cost more than the 2017 tax cuts, the Pandemic CARES Act, Biden stimulus, and the Inflation Reduction Act combined. It would add $6 trillion over 10 years to the deficit. Ultimately, my projections show deficits heading to about $4 trillion a decade from now if this bill is passed combined with the baseline, and even higher if interest rates rise. And we've seen that interest rates are rising.
To be clear, there's plenty of good stuff in this bill that I really do support, like extending the tax cuts for most Americans from Trump's first term. I think that's great. There's also some weird stuff in there that I really don't support, like a big increase in this special tax subsidy given to people, particularly very affluent people in blue states, where they get to write off a portion of their local taxes on their federal tax bill, even though that doesn't really make any sense. It also doesn't repeal all of the wasteful Green New Deal boondoggle subsidies from Biden's big Inflation Reduction Act that had nothing to do with inflation. And then the Big Beautiful Bill introduces a bunch more weird tax loopholes and exemptions that complicate the tax code. And I really want it all simplified and just reduce the rates for everyone, not a bunch more new unique carve-outs and loopholes and hundreds of pages more of IRS guidance, all that kind of stuff that creates a complicated boondoggle that benefits whoever can hire the best accountants. But again, it is what it is, and I do acknowledge the political realities that constrain the Trump administration from just enacting the kind of bill that I would like to see and that they claim they would want to see. But just be more honest about it is really all I'm asking for from Karoline Leavitt and from the Trump administration. Don't just make claims that are obviously not true and then tell us to pass it and it's big and it's beautiful. That just really rubs me the wrong way. And all we're asking for is a little bit of honesty and realism. If you told us, listen, the Trump administration wants to balance the books, but Congress will not pass a balanced budget. They will refuse to pass it and the government will shut down. So we have to do this. It's not perfect, it's flawed, but it is what it is. I would have a lot more time for that and a lot more understanding of that. But I'm really just asking for a little bit of honesty here. And unfortunately, in politics in general, that's just really too much to ask. But what do you guys think? Do you support the big, beautiful bill? I still can't believe they literally named it that in the legislation. It's very funny to me, but whatever, I guess. Let me know in the comments, and do hit that like button and make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet.